The US Open has become the most unpredictable Grand Slam on the men's tour in the last 2 decades. I mean, no man has successfully defended his title since Roger Federer in 2008. A total of 9 different players have tried, and they've all failed. And this time, both the defending champion and a former champion got kicked out in the early rounds, leaving us all scratching our heads and asking what just happened. What went wrong at the US Open for Novak and Carlos, and what does this mean moving forward?
It was a fight against myself, in my mind during the match.
I did arrive to New York, just not feeling fresh mentally and physically.
Novak faced Moldovan qualifier Radu Albot in the first round, and honestly, I didn't pick too much from the match apart from the fact that Djokovic was struggling with his serve and rhythm on some shots. It looked like his usual first round level at Grand Slams, so things didn't really look too sinister at this point. Djokovic was clinical on break points. And he created a total of 16 breakpoint opportunities himself, converting 6 of them as he breezed through the match in straight sets to maintain a perfect 18-0 record in the US Open first round. Looking back at the stats, Nole made 10 double faults and only managed to get roughly half of his first serves in. But it didn't matter. He was playing an opponent ranked 138th in the world, so he could get away with anything. At least I thought so. And to address any worries about his knee, Djokovic had some reassuring words in the press conference after the match.
Knee is fine, really. I haven't had any issues throughout the entire Olympic tournament and here first round. So.
Going into the second round, Novak was up against his compatriot Laslo Djere. Djere had just battled through 5 sets in a comeback win against Jan-Lennard Struff, but we also knew that he had elbow surgery back in April and still wasn't quite at the level where he used to be. Novak, on the other hand, still hadn't fixed his serve, but he was able to dominate the baseline exchanges. Serving to stay in the first set, Djere played a horrible service game as Novak broke to love to take the first set 6-4. Djere broke early on in the second set, and it looked like we were going to be in for some drama, but a horrible volley allowed Novak to draw level. Djere didn't win another game after that. Laslo had been struggling physically and had to retire after getting broken early in the third. With the win over Djere, Nole became the first player in history to win 90 or more matches at every Grand Slam. But there were genuine reasons for concern. 2 matches into the tournament, and Novak still couldn't make up to 50% of his first serves. And on top of that, he managed to double fault another 8 times. Djokovic himself was worried and had this to say after the match.
I served awful, so playing without the serve, you have to grind, you have to run. I guess I have to rely on my baseline game. I'm happy with the way I'm playing from back of the court. I still have to serve better, much better, in order to have a chance to go far deep in the tournament. It's only going to get tougher from here.
With 2 matches down and a possible 5 to go, it was now or never because Novak was going to be dealing with some way tougher opponents moving forward. Novak faced an in-form and confident Alexei Popyrin in the third round, and from history, we already knew he was going to be a difficult opponent for Novak. They faced off twice this year in Australia and Wimbledon, and both times, Popyrin had a couple of chances to take the match to a 5-setter. However, Novak got away each time. This time, though, he wasn't going to escape, especially with a poor serve. Besides, Popyrin came in with a game plan. Part of the plan was to take away the ball speed and mix up the pace so that Novak had no rhythm to work with. As simple as that sounds, it was pretty effective. Popyrin also found a lot of success at the net, winning 25 out of 36 net points. On a number of occasions, he also hit some approaches down the middle so that Novak didn't have any angles to work with either. We also saw that Popyrin is not just a player with a big serve and forehand. His backhand was solid all match, and he was slicing a lot to disrupt Novak's rhythm. Pop was also creating a variety of spins to unsettle Novak. I mean, just look at this point. In addition to that, he also flattened out the shots for winners when he needed to. And finally, Popyrin's movement and occasional scrambling was unbelievable. It paid off in the 8th game, where he ended up breaking Novak to take the first set. And also paid off in the 5th game of the 4th set, where he broke Novak again. For Novak, he hit an atrocious 14 double faults to take his double fault tally to 32 for the tournament. He was also terrible at the net, winning 19 out of 40 points, and he just seemed uninterested at times, especially in the first 2 sets. On top of that, he seemed too eager to end points quickly. In situations like this, you just ask yourself, what went wrong with Novak? How did his serve, which was so clutch during the Olympics, just suddenly fall apart during the US Open? My best guess is that the Olympics drained him physically and mentally, leaving him with literally nothing for the tournament. And unlike before, when Novak could get away with wins despite being at 50%, I think it's safe to say that he's at a point in his career where that's no longer possible. The US Open was the worst I've seen Djokovic serve, and I'm yet to understand why he looked so uncomfortable on court. Novak did do some self-assessment after the match, and essentially said that he was lucky to make it to the 3rd round.
Honestly, the way I felt and the way I played from the beginning of this tournament, 3rd round is a success. I mean, I've played some of the worst tennis I've ever played, honestly, serving by far the worst ever.
Another possible reason for Novak's early loss was that his preparation block just wasn't adequately long enough this time. I mean, he skipped Cincinnati because he was taking time off to celebrate with friends and also be with his family. He didn't even get to play a competitive match on hard court before the US Open, so we knew it was always going to be difficult. But the biggest takeaway, in addition to Popyrin's strategy and Novak's collapse, was the Aussie's confidence and composure throughout the match. We saw this when Nole tried to break right back in the 4th set, and also when Popyrin was serving for the match. Popyrin was confident he could beat Novak, and this is what he had to say after the match.
It was something that I kind of thought I could do, you know. I've had some matches where I've played and you know, I felt way better than I felt out there today. But I think the way I composed myself and the way I tactically played the match, that was up there with one of the best matches that I've played.
Now, it was definitely not Popyrin's best match ever. Both players had similar numbers on the first serve percentage and win percentage on first serve, and total number of aces too. However, Popyrin, carrying the confidence from his title win in Montreal, just didn't buckle under the pressure. And the reward for that? A round of 16 presence for the very first time in his career. Now, Popyrin went on to lose to Big Foe in the next round, but I'm sure he still has plenty to be proud of from this year's US Open. Popyrin became only the 2nd Aussie to beat Novak in a major, the first one being Leighton Hewitt all the way back in 2006. And for Popyrin, none of this compares to his Masters 1000 title win in Canada.
Winning Montreal was way bigger than today.
I recently made a video talking about Popyrin's Canada Open win and the tweaks to his game he made to make that possible. I mean, it wasn't entirely a fluke. He's always had the big game to trouble top opponents, but the consistency was somewhat lacking. But not anymore. At least he'd love to think so.
I believe that I have the game to be able to beat these top players, and for me to be able to do it and back it up is a big thing for me.
So for the first time since 2000, the defending men's singles champion at the US Open lost before the 4th round. Back in 2000, Andre Agassi lost in the 2nd round to Arnaud Clément as the defending champion himself. And now Novak in 2024. What's next for him? I'll talk about that later in the video. So what happened to Carlos Alcaraz at the US Open? Alcaraz became the first top 3 seed to lose before the 3rd round of the men's singles at the US Open since 2006. It came as a huge shock to everyone, and virtually no one saw it coming. With only one hardcourt match under his belt this summer, which he also played badly and lost to Monfils, Alcaraz came to New York with perhaps not enough preparation. Interestingly, he said it wasn't going to be a problem for him.
I'm not worried about not having too many matches on hardcourt.
Carlos was up against Li Tu, a man with an inspirational story. You see, Li Tu was born in Adelaide, Australia, to Chinese parents. He picked up the sport as a kid and was great at it before stepping away at 18 to attend college. During his time in college, Tu coached many juniors and was working towards a comeback, a dream which he would eventually realize 6 years later. Tu cracked the top 300 in July of 2022 and was on track to achieve more success, until tragedy struck. You see, the whole time, Tu's biggest support system was his mother. She'd been battling lung cancer, and with her condition deteriorating, Tu brought his wedding forward, just so that his beloved mom could see him get married. His mom passed away shortly after, and you can only imagine all the emotions that he would have been feeling at the time. Yet Tu kept on grinding on tour, battled through qualies, and set up a date with Alcaraz at Arthur Ashe Stadium despite not winning a single tour-level match all year. Now inside the top 200, Tu promised that he was going to throw everything at Alcaraz, and that's exactly what he did. Alcaraz breezed through the first set against his 28-year-old opponent, but Tu wasn't just going to roll over, so he tested Alcaraz's physical limits in the second set as he leveled the match. It was crazy because Alcaraz made only 2 unforced errors in the first set, but with Tu stepping up to the challenge, Alcaraz made 9 times more unforced errors in the second set. There were lots of great points in the first 2 sets, but it's such a shame that some tennis fans don't get to see them. Anyway, Carlos cleaned up on his forehand errors, became more measured in his aggression, and took the match in 4 sets after almost 3 hours. The victory made it 15 consecutive Grand Slam wins for Carlitos. But personally, I was even more thrilled with Tu's performance. From walking away from the sport to making a comeback 6 years later, losing a loved one along the way, all just to get to the point where he's playing in the biggest match of his life on Arthur Ashe Stadium against Carlos Alcaraz. I mean, what a moment. Seeing inspiring comeback stories like Tu's is incredibly encouraging for some people who might even find themselves in similar situations. Tennis is a harsh business, and I made a video detailing everything that these pro players go through just to reach the bright lights of the US Open. You should totally check it out if you haven't seen it already. But circling back to Alcaraz, the match made it 60 career Grand Slam wins for Carlitos, but he shared his concerns about making so many unforced errors, particularly in the second set. Despite being tested in the first round, though, no one expected Carlos to be sent packing in the second. Carlos faced Botic van de Zandschulp in the second round, and in the first set alone, we saw some really low percentage tennis from Carlitos. He struggled to make good returns and get into rallies. With poor timing and shot selection, the first set was over in a breeze as Alcaraz fell behind 6-1. Alcaraz didn't even win a single point at the net or even hit any winner in the first set. Meanwhile, he also managed 8 unforced errors. Things got a lot better for Carlitos in the second set as he began to find his rhythm. Both players exchanged breaks early on, but Botic was on a personal mission to remind everyone of his status as a former top 25 player. Botic has always served well and has the ability to rip the ball hard. He can also come forward to the net and has great movement for his size too. Now, none of that changed against Alcaraz. Trying to get back in the game, Alcaraz's forehand continued to leak more errors as he ramped up the aggression. But Botic was a different breed of player and was able to go toe-to-toe with Alcaraz as he took the second set 7-5. It was rinse and repeat in the third set, and that was it. Alcaraz had gotten beaten in the second round. For me, on the one hand, it wasn't the biggest upset of the year because Botic is a former top 25 player who reached the US Open quarterfinals and has half a dozen top 10 wins, so he's always had the tools. However, looking at the fact that those back-to-back losses to Holger Rune kinda gave Botic some mental scars, and also the fact that he'd fallen off in the rankings, couldn't string many wins together, and even considered retirement, it definitely was a huge upset.
Back when I said it, maybe I'm thinking about retiring. At that point, I was just being honest.
Reflecting on the loss, Alcaraz said that he felt like he was playing against himself and later admitted that he had taken a step backward mentally.
It was a fight against myself, in my mind during the match. A lot of emotions that I couldn't control.
On a side note, with the US Open wrapping up this weekend, I wanted to take a moment to share my next destination with all of you. I'll be at the Tennis Congress in Tucson, Arizona from October 10th to the 13th, handling all things video production. Now, if you're unfamiliar, the Tennis Congress offers the chance to really improve your game by working directly with world-renowned coaches like Emilio Sanchez, Craig O'Shaughnessy, and Kamau Murray, to name a few. Again, those dates are October 10th to 13th, so if you make it out there, be sure to give me a shout. It's not a coincidence that all the Olympic medalists got kicked out in the first week, and there's no denying that fatigue was a big factor. Oh, and the 3 players that made the semis or better at Wimbledon also won medals at the Olympics. They literally went from grass to clay to hard court in less than a month. That was always going to be too much for a 37-year-old Novak. Going by what he says from the interviews, Novak is motivated and wants to keep playing at the highest level, so let's not read too much into his loss. And for those of us who are worried about his motivation fading away, Novak says the fire is still burning.
I still feel the drive, you know, I still have the competitive spirit, still want to make more history and enjoy myself on the tour, hope to inspire many young people to watch tennis or play tennis. Those are some of the reasons why I still keep on going.
He's now scheduled to play in Shanghai and Paris. And with the Serbian now at risk of not making it to the ATP finals, only his best tennis is going to be enough this time. Djokovic now needs a big performance in at least one tournament. Also, with over 2,300 points to defend for the remainder of the year, the Joker will also be looking to rack up significant points to put him in a good place ahead of the 2025 Australian Open, because truth be told, he doesn't have many chances left. At least it's not hard to think so, considering that he might be one major injury away from calling time on the sport. And by the way, 2024 is the first year since 2002 that no member of the Big Three won a slam. Whether Djokovic's problem is physical, mental, or emotional, he definitely has his work cut out for him. But for Alcaraz, it's a little different. I really don't think there's that much to be worried about here. Winning Roland Garros, Wimbledon, and the Olympic silver medal in the space of 2 months is incredible. That said, it's going to be unrealistic to expect Alcaraz to maintain those constantly high levels for so long, and the man himself did mention that although he took out time to rest, it wasn't enough, and he didn't feel as refreshed for the US Open. But the counter-argument to this would be, what about the Big Three? How did they manage to win literally every tournament they entered for a period in their careers? Well, the answer to that is something I want to talk about next. We're now into the 9th month of the season, and we still have the Davis Cup, the Asian Swing, European Indoor Swing, and the ATP Finals left. On top of that, top players like Alcaraz will probably have 1 or 2 exhibitions to participate in, and by January, we're all going to hit the reset button. Iga Swiatek has complained tirelessly about the hectic schedule, but with no immediate answers to either making the offseason longer or freeing up the schedule, it becomes the responsibility of the players to prepare themselves mentally, and that's something Carlos could become better at. Also last year, we saw how Carlos fell off during the second half of the season, which led to some doubts about his staying power at the top. This year, we've seen early round exits in Cincinnati and New York, and some fans believe, just like last year when Novak broke Carlos at the Cincinnati final, the Olympic final seemingly had the same effect. But I think there's still more to it. You see, Alcaraz still doesn't have a backup plan to fall back on when things aren't going his way. On days when his aggression and forehand lead him to a vicious cycle of errors, he should be able to pump the brakes on the aggression and focus on a more compact game, even if it isn't as flashy or exciting for the crowd. Alcaraz is still 21 years old and has a steep learning curve, so it's not hard to imagine it all coming together for him. He's a champion on and off the court and has managed to put himself in a position where people now compare him to the Big Three. In fairness, this is perhaps the first slam that Alcaraz played really badly in the last couple of years, so it's totally understandable, and the Big Three have had their own share of wild random losses in the past too. But here's my hot take on the Alcaraz situation. Some of you might disagree, but it is what it is. It can be argued that Alcaraz is just as complete as the Big Three and has taken some of their best traits talent-wise. However, he's yet to level up when it comes to dealing with adversity. He's such a winner that he literally doesn't know how to lose, if that makes sense. Whether the loss at the Olympic final affected him or not is difficult to say, but I believe that we can all agree that once Alcaraz manages to make some of these improvements, he'll be almost unstoppable, and he just might fulfill his Big Three level ambitions. But over to you guys. What do you think went wrong for Novak and Carlos at the US Open, and what do you make of both players moving forward? Let me tell you, I can't wait to read your hot takes in the comments. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out our Discord community. It's the place to talk tennis, ask questions, and maybe even get featured in one of our upcoming deep dives. If you loved this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and I can't wait to see all of you in the next one. Until next time, keep swinging.